This series of mini lessons is for those who want to build the basics of Arabic in as little time as possible. It'll be especially useful for those who want to study the Quran with this channel. Today's video is on the subjunctive, jussive, and imperative verbs. First, let me give you a brief explanation of Arabic verb tenses. In the previous lesson on Arabic verb conjugation, we learned about the perfect and imperfect tenses. If you haven't watched that video, please refer to the link in the description. Perfect tense is used for completed actions, and imperfect tense is used for incomplete, ongoing, or future actions. The imperative is for command. Subjunctive and jussive are different moods of the imperfect tense. That's why I put them under the imperfect tense group. So the good news is that their conjugations are very similar to the imperfect verbs. Subjunctive is used for talking about intent, purpose, etc. Jussive is used for conditional sentences, prohibition, etc. With that settled, let's move on to the subjunctive conjugation. As I said, subjunctive is very similar to the imperfect conjugation. For example, for these verbs, the only difference is the vowel at the end. The dhamma changes to fatha, so yafalu becomes yafala. For 2fs conjugation, you just drop the nun, so tafalina becomes tafali. For the dual verbs as well, you just drop the nun. For masculine plural verbs, you also drop the nun, but this time you add a silent alif at the end. And this ending looks the same as the perfect verb conjugation, so be careful not to confuse it with them. Next, feminine plural verbs don't change at all from the imperfect. And that's all for the subjunctive conjugation. Moving on, let's talk about when to use subjunctive. Subjunctive has many usages, but in this video we'll cover 3 of them. First, we use it to negate the future tense. To do so, we use the combination of len plus subjunctive. For example, len afala means I will not do. Next, we use the subjunctive with the an particle to express desire or intent, and so on. For example, uridu an afala means I want to do. Next, another use of subjunctive is for talking about purpose. We combine the subjunctive verb with the particle li, meaning in order to. For example, dhahabtu liyafala means I went in order to do. And there are other particles that are similar to li, like k or hatta. Now let's learn about the jussive conjugation. Jussive conjugations are also very similar to the imperfect. For these verbs, the last vowel changes from dhamma to sukun, and the rest of the jussive conjugations are the same as the subjunctive. I like to mention, though, that there are some regular verbs that are rather complicated in subjunctive or jussive, but I'll cover them in a separate video. Now, let's talk about when to use jussive. Jussive also has many usages, but in this video, we'll talk about 4 of them. First, we negate the past tense by using the jussive verb with the particle lam. For example, lam afal means I didn't do. Next, we use jussive for prohibition, which means a negative command. For example, la tafal means don't do. Next, we can use jussive for an indirect command with the particle li. For example, liyafal means let him do. Also, we can form a conditional sentence using jussive and the particle in, meaning if. For example, in tatbukh, akul means if you cook, I will eat. Please note that we have a jussive verb in both the conditional clause and the result clause. Now let's move on to the imperative. The easiest way to form an imperative verb is by deriving it from the second person jussive form. So let me show you how to derive an imperative form from this verb tafal, which is the 2ms jussive form of the verb fa'ala. Step 1. Start with the jussive verb. Step 2. Remove the ta prefix. Step 3. If the remaining part has a sukun on the first letter, add a hamzatu wasl. What about this one? Does it have a sukun? Yes. So we add a hamzatu wasl, and the final imperative form is if'al. Let's look at another example. This one is also a 2ms jussive verb meaning you write. Now remove the ta prefix. Does it have a sukun? Yes. So we add a hamzatu wasl, and the final imperative form is uktub. Please note that the hamzatu wasl can take either kasra or dhamma, and to determine which one it takes, we need to look at the vowel on the third letter. If it is dhamma, the hamzatu wasl also takes a dhamma, like this verb uktub. If the third letter doesn't have a dhamma, then the hamzatu wasl will take a kasra, like the first example, if'al. Let's look at two more examples. This is a 2ms jussive verb of the form for verb arsala, meaning to send. Now let's remove the prefix. Does it have a sukun? Yes. So you might think we have to add a hamzatu wasl. But in the case of form 4, we add an alif hamza with a fatha, and it becomes arsilu and not irsilu. So remember that form 4 is an exception. Moving on, this time let's try with a form 2 verb. First remove the prefix, and then does it have a sukun? No, this time it has a fatha. So you don't need to add anything, and you already have your final imperative form alim. Now let's look at the conjugation chart. As you can see, imperative verbs only exist in the second person. If you compare them with the jussive verbs, the only difference is the prefix. Jussive verbs have ta prefix, while imperative verbs have hamzatu wasl. But as I explained earlier, hamzatu wasl is only necessary if the first letter has a sukun. And also remember that imperative verbs are only for positive command. For negative commands, you should instead use a jussive verb. And that'll do it for today's lesson. Here is a quick summary of what we learned today. Thank you for watching.